Vineyard.
Somos Viña.
We are Vineyard.
There's a witness of the gospel in healthy organizational leadership. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do in the manner by which I say I'm going to do it. There's areas of integrity. These documents are helpful for that. They don't produce integrity. They help us walk in the integrity that we want to walk in, that God has called us to walk in. So they don't create something. They allow us to walk with the very thing that is part of our calling as pastors and leaders. In support of that, it's also the high call that boards have to support the work of ministry. So one of the things that's been incredibly, honestly encouraging for me is hosting two role-based meetups or role-based meetups at the last two national conferences for board members, elders, and trustees. 7 a.m. Wednesday morning for 90 minutes. The room is full at 7 a.m. because these are people who have real jobs, they run businesses, they are on other boards, they show up on time to make sure that they're taking their commitment seriously. And they're in the room, and we've done a few different interactive exercises, and they are excited. And without exception, board members who have run their own real businesses are moving towards the end of this meeting going, thank you. Thank you for helping us have the sort of institutional integrity that allows us to operate with confidence, not just in crisis, but in the day-to-day operations. We know who should be making what decisions when and how we make those decisions together, collaboratively, and accountably.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, Jay Pathak will be interviewing Robb Morgan, the managing director for Vineyard USA. Let's listen in.
Hey, Robb.
Hey, Jay, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me, man. This will be good to do an update. We've been going around doing the updates with all the different team, and we just wrapped up national conference. So that was a lot of work, and East and West.
A lot of work, but
really
wonderful.
Good. Yeah. Really, really encouraging. And it kind of marks a point where we're crossing a threshold where a lot of the work we've been doing, specifically around ordination and bylaws, is getting cleaned up. I mean, I know every time I say stuff like that, you're like, we're nowhere near done. Don't say that. But it is a threshold. Let's put it that way. And we
Absolutely.
had Andy's talk, the opening night where, played the piano, did all this beautiful stuff, Order and Abundance. And then you spoke after that. So I think that maybe be a good place to start. You had seen him do a version of that before, and that's kind of why you thought it'd be good for our conference,
Yes.
right? So tell me what about that you really like? What is it that gets your attention with that?
Oh, it's great. Well, I saw Andy do that talk at a conference called Jubilee, which is run by CCO, which is a campus ministry primarily in the Northeast and in the kind of central Midwest. And I was there in attendance as a church that has hosted and sponsored some CCO ministries in Delaware, Ohio. And man, he talked about the concept of order and abundance as the pathway of human flourishing, and talked about it really as a way to think through every step of life, whether you're a young adult in college, whether you're starting a family and moving into a different life stage as you move towards retirement. But there's just these ways by which the abundant opportunities that present themselves from the Lord and from our careers and from our families and from the different developmental stages that we take on require us to imagine what sort of order and structure produces the right sort of container to hold that really well, that allows us to live with peace and live with purpose and cooperate with the things of the Spirit that are put before us. And he did the work on the piano, and I remember weeping. I remember being met by the Lord and just thinking, this is the most beautiful picture of simple structures that produce like real-time life, like it's life-giving. And when we talked about melody and harmony and the opening session, I just raised my hand and I said, I think Andy Crouch would be the person to kind of paint this picture for us as the Vineyard, particularly in the movement, in the moment, when we're talking about creating new structures to hold new opportunities as we imagine a next generation, a next season, a next kind of wave of ministry that God is going to bless us with.
Yeah, so you're obviously managing director, so you run a lot of things. I mean, some of it can make sense. I can fill in the blanks. But what do you think it is about that makes that emotional for you? What makes you go, wow, that touches me in a deep place? Well, I mean, I think for me as well, but I'm just curious for you. What do you think it is that moves you about that?
It's probably a couple things. One, I think just in general, music comes in a side door, right? Music gets you in a way that it taps into emotion. So if you were an eighth grader and you ever dedicated a song on the radio, you hear that song 30 years later, and you're in a space, you're in a kind of place again, whether that's a memory or a moment. I think that there is something by the way of there's like an intuition that this is not random, this is not happenstance. This is purposeful and uplifting. There's a beauty particularly with the classical music piece that Andy plays, there is just a beauty to this thing. And I think it creates, you lose the order because of the beauty, but you cannot divorce the two. So there's a way by which you are uplifted and transcended. I know for me, it's closing my eyes and allowing that to sort of wash over. There's a purity about it. There's a beauty to it. Both the resonance and the dissonance that comes through the music creates harmonies and contrasts that sort of just open up a horizon of experience, right? It's like the horizon opens up and your vision gets a little wider and a little higher. And then in Andy's kind of explanation as we go through it, it is all built on very simple blocks. It's built on, four chords or notes that are ordered in a certain way, but still allow for tremendous possibility. So for me, I think it is just simply the fact that in that moment, you're connecting to all the possibilities and realize that there's some measure of restraint that artists have to engage in order for the beauty to be fully realized, right? You can't just keep playing random notes. You can't just keep hitting the random keys to do a thing. There's restraint. There's real commitment to a form of beauty that is evident when, I found it profoundly emotional.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and we should have set this up front, but obviously you're the managing director, a role we've never had before. We've had maybe a kind of an analog of that being a national coordinator, but this role's different in that you're helping lead our teams, helping align budgets and timelines. Before we did this conference, I think maybe in the very first time you addressed our team, you talked about order and abundance. How do we structure, our budgets, our timelines, our staff to produce in a way that isn't just haphazard all over the place? So in one sense, it really does kind of ring the right note in what you're doing in relationship to, really our team, where the Vineyard's at right now. So talk a little bit about from the role you took, what's changed, so it's a new role, a lot's changed. We talked a little bit before we got on, like all the things have changed. A lot has changed in what amounts to 3 years, maybe 4, or if you stretch it out a little bit. Talk a little bit about some of the different things that you've gotten to help orchestrate and build and design.
Sure. Well, initially, even when you and I began talking about this opportunity after the reorg was implemented and after we started these jobs, we sort of targeted 3.5 years. There's some run up, there's some amount of time that has to happen for things to actually begin and for traction.
Yep, that's right.
But there's a moment when you have to say, is any of this working, or are we moving the needle in the manner by which the planning and the realignment of finances and budget and all that kind of stuff. So we are on time to sort of assess what's happened and ask questions about how much or how helpful have the things that have kind of gotten a hold of us, or that we've gotten a hold of with our team broadly, and then certainly as the movement collectively. And so, when I walked into this role, that's this order of abundance framework allows you to think through, are we building a machine or are we attending to chaos, right? The other paradigms are, we're trying to bring order to chaos, but we're also trying to bring life into a space that doesn't produce rigidity and just simply systems for the sake of replication. And so the framework has been really helpful because we're adding lots of things, but we're not trying to promote further chaos and random attempts to do something we think might be valuable. We're trying to cooperate with the sort of work of the Spirit that is bringing order to chaotic environments, bringing light into darkness, so to speak. And at the same time, we're trying to cooperate with the Spirit that is life. We're trying to cooperate with the work that God does, which is to bring life. I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. And so this should be a place in which we experience the goodness of God, not just the sort of structure that produces an expected outcome. We're not creating kind of math problems that people need to solve, but we're looking for opportunities to cooperate with what the Spirit is doing in new seasons. And so when I look at the things that we have done, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of work, some which is really measurable. We've seen the endorsement process of existing ordained pastors tip over 1,000. I think we're right at about 1,140 pastors.
That's awesome.
Who received an invitation to raise their hand and say, I am an ordained Vineyard pastor, and received a national endorsement through a very simple process that included somebody else also affirming that call. And it wasn't just counting for the sake of counting. It was acknowledging the faithful service of men and women over decades and decades, the commitment to care for a church and a community, a congregation in the city. It's the well done of faithful service that often goes underappreciated and underrecognized. Within our bylaw process, we have just tipped over 97% participation of all Vineyard churches.
Wow.
So I think we're only at about 20 or 25 churches that have yet to officially say, I'm moving in step with what this process requires of me to show further kind of connection and commitment to engage some of the implicit dynamics and make them more clear and more understood, to work together collaboratively. Those are massive demonstrations of connection and trust.
Well, say a little bit more about that, because, I think for those that were paying close attention to the reorg process, what the executive team was doing, might go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. But there's a lot of things hidden in that. Like why ordination, why bylaws, why do those things have to go together? And what does it mean now? What's new? What changes now that we have those things? Like, is that just an IRS, just pushed across the table? We have some more paperwork, or what does that enable us to do or be that's different?
Well, and I'll pull this through Andy's talk in some regards, right? If we were trying to build bureaucratic systems, it would be for the simple fact of saying you submitted the paperwork, you got the stamp of approval, and now you end up on a board somewhere. But what we've imagined is that we're a family of churches, that we participate broadly in the family of God as a part of that family and as a unique expression. But as Vineyard churches, we are, while locally governed, and in some ways you could use the word autonomous, by being a part of a family, we actually are interdependent, that what happens to one of us does affect all of us. And when we look over the history of our movement, we can see that has been an area of weakness. And what the bylaw process allows us to do is strengthen our understanding of what it is to be connected to one another, for good and for bad. When something happens, we can celebrate that. When something happens that's tragic or difficult, we can support it. And when necessary, we can address movement-wide, family-wide areas of improvement for pastoral competencies or training, or how do we help retired pastors be more financially solvent so that they can do retirement and not have to stay in a position because that's where the paycheck is. We can think about leader development differently and ensure that when we see leaders move through systems, the issues of identity and who we are both practically and theologically are more consistent, not so much, again, to replicate copy-paste kind of frameworks, but to say the life that God has given the Vineyard is being kind of reproduced generationally. Your kids look like you, but they're not you. And your grandkids resemble certain aspects of their grandparents, but they're not carbon copies. There's a way by which the DNA of life-giving entities is transmitted generation to generation, and that's the work that is underway. And so the bylaw project specifically is more about clarifying what is our relational commitments to one another, and how do we ensure that we are cooperating and when violating, that we can attend to those things in a way that brings health, reconciliation, repair as needed. So while it's bylaw work that is sort of governmental, it's actually family work. It's what sort of family do we want to be, and what sort of commitments are we able to make to one another? And then how do we hold each other to those commitments over the long haul?
Yeah, it's funny to think about, the way we were structured, which we really still are in so many ways. The way we were structured, it was perfectly designed to have people just go out and do stuff, plant churches, try things, ordain who you think you need to ordain, do the thing. But now that we're at the size we're at, the maturity, and we're trying to do a generational transfer, it means you have to pause and say, okay, where have we lost some consistency? Where do we have disagreement? And what do we expect of extra local leaders? Like, should there be some mechanism by which a local church can get help, even if they're legally distinct? Yeah. Can they at least get some help? Can they get a little bit of counsel that's a little outside of their own ability, that isn't just sheerly relational? And or what is the responsibility of extra local leaders if something is kind of coming off the rails? Do we have the ability to at least raise our hand, ask some questions, build a process, even if the ultimate authority, we still are for the local church. So if the ultimate authority there and the ultimate legal standing is there, can we at least build some processes by which we can engage, relate, hold some kind of consistency? And those kinds of things they've always felt nebulous at best, maybe is the nicest way to say it. Or, yeah, we can do it. We'll try things, but the minute they're like, no, thanks, the conversation ends. And then the only recourse we have was a trademark agreement. That was it, which doesn't seem like a good way to have a relationship. Within that, it's funny. I was thinking about this week. My daughter, my oldest daughter, just came back from college.
Mm-hmm.
And she was describing how, she brought this up, how when they got new roommates in their dorm, they had to do a roommate agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically, you've got these poor RAs managing kids that are going to try to kill each other in these classes, in their dorm rooms, around how clean should it be and how many guests can come over and when do you have your own quiet time and what do you do with music and where does food go and can I use your stuff, can you use my stuff, all that stuff. Build all of that so that you're alleviating future conflict. Okay, so she says, I did that. So Dad, I've come home. I don't know. I think maybe can we build a roommate agreement? Like, because I'm not 12, I'm not 15, I'm 21. I know this is different, but I can't quite tell how it's different. What do you think about that? I was like, dude, that would be great. We should do that. So even healthy adult relationships, say, anybody's married. It's like, okay, how do the chores really work? So in some ways, we've just never really done that. So in the most boring way, that's at least what we're doing. But then it may be a more spiritual way. We're saying, what does it mean that we're a church? What does it mean we're a family? What does it mean we're connected to other churches? And then that has to be legal in some sense. That's bylaws and ordination. So it feels really feels encouraging to get through that. How have you seen the process for pastors in that? You've gotten to talk to pastors all over the country, more than me. Where have you seen resistance that ends up becoming agreement? Where have you seen that change in sort of the way the conversations work?
What's interesting is, and first let me just say, we have assembled an amazing team. So I have gotten to talk to hundreds of pastors and at various levels of these projects, but we also have some amazing support system that has done the real heavy lift of walking churches through processes. We've got partners that have supported us through this process. So there's probably two things. There are churches that are looking at the work, having come out of maybe painful experiences of leadership failing, of church split, of some sort of financial mismanagement that nobody actually knew who was responsible. And so there are churches that are looking at their historic bylaws and seeing gaps that are illustrated by very real circumstances that have caused pain, and are looking at bylaws that have increased degrees of accountability, regardless of the model, whether it's a traditional board model or an elder and board model, that all of those have increased levels of sort of clarified accountability and best practices. And so they're saying, thank you, because what we had was insufficient, particularly in the crisis moment when these documents are actually the guidepost or the pathway to attend to those things. Then there's other folks that are looking at them and going...
So let me make sure I understood that. So what you're basically saying is they were kind of like, I wish this world would exist this way. Thank you for actually making it. We've been through enough pain that we needed this kind of stuff. Wow. I'm so excited the Vineyard's becoming that. So that's a percentage of people. Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. And then there's another percentage of folks that I would say are sort of in the sweet spot of like walking this out with us, as saying our bylaws don't actually say what is so about the nature of our relationship. And the trademark agreement isn't an adequate ecclesiological document. The trademark agreement is around use of a logo. But that's not what it means to be a church as a part of a family of churches. And so there are some that would say in the moment, and some of it's in that generational succession, it's saying we don't want to be independent. We do want to explicitly communicate our commitment to one another and our interdependence on other churches and on the national movement as a whole. And so in some ways, the timing of this matches probably some of the generational priorities of wanting to be a part of a thing that maybe matches some of the millennial, maybe Gen Z stuff. I just don't want to be on my own. I'd rather be a part of something bigger than myself, part of a story that's larger than myself. And this sort of scratches that itch in one way. People saying this is clarifying our explicit commitments to one another in a way that our previous documents didn't allow. It allowed us to, in times of stress, choose for ourselves whatever we wanted without, formal commitments. And then there are other folks in some ways that are are honestly looking at issues of competency. And I don't mean that in an inherently negative way, but pastors are not trained in these things.
Well, it
right?
turns out no pastor I know got into this to do bylaws. Like, not one.
Totally.
Like, no pastor's
totally.
like, the thing I'm really excited about pastoring is getting in front of a lawyer and just rolling up my sleeves and working out all the legal language. I'm so pumped, and really trying to think through how the minutes for our board should work. That's the thing I'm most juiced about. I don't know one pastor, maybe there is one, and they're probably, their church doesn't do very well, but that wants that. So I get it. And so but it's a part of being adults and having healthy organizations. Yeah.
Well, and what you realize is that to do the work well requires increased levels of trust. We're in a cultural moment where there's an inherent distrust of organizations and institutions, and increasingly of specifically religious organizations. If our documents and our communications and our finances are done well and transparent and forward-facing, and we're confident that we're operating with a degree of integrity, that even when questioned or even when we make mistakes, we come back and clean those things up, there's a witness of the health and the truth and if I'm honest, Jay, I think there's a witness of the gospel in healthy organizational leadership. And so I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do in the manner by which I say I'm going to do it. There's areas of integrity. These documents are helpful for that. They don't produce integrity. They help us walk in the integrity that we want to walk in, that God has called us to walk in. So they don't create something. They allow us to walk with and in step with the very thing that is part of our calling as pastors and leaders. And then in support of that, it's also the high call that boards have to support the work of ministry. So one of the things that's been incredibly, honestly encouraging for me is hosting 2 role-based meetups or role-based meetups at the last 2 national conferences for board members, elders, and trustees. 7 a.m. Wednesday morning for 90 minutes. The room is full at 7 a.m. because these are people who have real jobs. They run businesses. They are on other boards. They show up on time to make sure that they're taking their commitment seriously. And they're in the room, and we've done a few different interactive exercises, and they are excited. And without exception, board members who have run their own real businesses are moving towards the end of this meeting going, thank you. Thank you for helping us have the sort of institutional integrity that allows us to operate with confidence, not just in crisis, but in the day-to-day operations. We know who should be making what decisions when and how we make those decisions together, collaboratively, and accountably.
Vineyard USA's Women's Association is hosting a conference at the Evanston Vineyard in the Chicago area from Thursday, October 2nd to Saturday, October 4th. We were made for more than just survival. God's invitation to his kingdom is greater, deeper, and more mysterious than we could ever imagine. The church needs women pastors and leaders to know their worth, take their rightful place, and boldly ask for more grace, more mercy, more compassion, and more courage to speak the truth of Jesus to a lonely and confused world. Come and join hundreds of women who dare to believe that God has more for their churches, their cities, and their own lives. The cost for the conference is just $99, and you can find more information at vineyardusa.org/events. Hope to see you there.
We're making it sound so positive, like everything,
Sure.
everything just rolled forward. But the truth is, this was like a new way of behaving for us, right?
Yeah.
Many people even joined the Vineyard because they didn't want what they understood as bureaucratic sort of control, or, some extra local bureaucratic leader that tells them what to do or tries to, of course, all the ridiculous illustrations are like the guy, the group that's going to tell you what color the carpet can be and tries to seize control of your building, or, hostilely tries to take over your church or manage your money or whatever, right? So there's all this sort of negative stories we know of sort of bureaucratic leadership.
Yeah.
So that, of course, creates anxiety for folks if they've been from a system like that. They maybe grew up in a system like that. They've loved the Vineyard is capacious and warm, and everyone, you have your own autonomy, but you still get to connect with folks. And so there's sort of a nostalgic way of understanding the Vineyard that in some ways we're threatening by suggesting we should do it differently. Tell me about a little bit. Have you seen, and you don't have to name names, of course, I don't think that would be wise, but as you've seen people sort of move through that a little bit, through conversations, you just described, for example, a board by the end of a meeting going, oh, you're just helping me. Thank you. Do you have similar kinds of experiences that would show how people are moving through that?
Yeah, well, I think in some ways, having done the work forward facing with as much transparency and even at a pace which for some has probably been too slow, for others may feel like it's been really fast, but every signal has been forward facing on a web page with a video attached to an email with documentation. So what I have experienced is that people are growing in confidence that what we say we're doing, we are actually doing. And so we have consistently said we are local governed churches. And so the bylaws resemble local governed churches. If you add in an amendment, it's to clarify that the governance of the local church is the ultimate authority of the local church. And the question of, well, how much control or autonomy is being gained or lost through the process, I believe that those who have been skeptical or concerned or worried or even fearful have found more often than not that their fears are assuaged when they read the documents and when they hear consistently repeated that we're not pulling away the responsibility of the local church, both for contextualization of preaching the gospel, for the ministries and the prior, how they run their liturgical services, like what's the liturgy of their services? Do they have to take communion every week now? I mean, those are larger questions that certainly we've not entertained at any level, but more significantly, how much control, how much influence, how much intervention, and consistently and repeatedly, that concern has been met with in writing, on repeat, in the formal documentations, in the bylaws, in the handbook. Local church governance is the way. We are an association of churches that are locally governed, and that's borne out to be true. Again, we're doing it with a manner of organizational integrity, and it's all been kind of forward facing. So it's been done with transparency, which means if the document that we have put in front of you today is really quite different than it was 2 years ago, then we've betrayed that trust. What's been evidence is it's not what we said 3 years ago, what we said through the reorg, what we said 18 months ago, and what we're putting in front of folks now has been consistent through line, that there are areas of strengthening our relationships that we need to make clear. And there are areas by which at our very best, we are independent, locally governed churches ministering to our cities through the very calling and gifts that God has put in the local church, and that we connect to each other for the sake of greater accountability and connection, support, resourcing, all those sorts of things. So the concern is usually, I would say, probably 3 conversations for the most kind of staunch, like, tell me what you're really going to do. Tell me where this is really headed. It's usually like 3 conversations of, nope, we're going to continue to commit to be who we say we're going to be, and you're going to see it all along the way. And in seeing it all, you retain the right as a local church to make a decision whether this is the vineyard you want to be a part of. That decision will always remain in the hands of the local church.
That's really good. Yeah. And so when you think about how churches implement this, like we've rolled out our parts, how do you see churches rolling this out with their own boards, their own congregations? Like if you're in a church right now, you might be listening.
Yeah.
I have no idea why it's playing America the Beautiful behind me, by the way. But let's just keep going as though that's not there. What do you, because if I'm just in a church, I'm hearing this going, wow, this is a lot of stuff I didn't know about. How do you imagine normal Vineyard folks engaging with this?
Yeah, I mean, what I would think a church attender should feel if they hear this is, you want your leaders to be connected to something bigger than themselves. Not so much for even crisis accountability, but we all have a finite limit of resource and ability and perspective. We want to be supported. We want to be connected. It is important that leaders are accountable to those that they serve under and for the sake of those that they serve. It is a yellow flag, if not a red flag, when leaders are unaccountable to structures of authority. And that is a great concern. And it's actually been something that has been a weakness of our movement when structures of accountability were unclear or mostly relational and not explicit. Then who steps in and who says what? You referenced this in a meeting recently, that there's a historic Vineyard shrug that arises at certain times. Well, what could we do? And who should do something? And what would we have done if we could have done something? Well, there's a way by which that's an abdication of the responsibility to lead well, to be shepherds of God's flock and under shepherds of the great shepherd himself. And the scriptures say that we should lead with the sense of the accountability we have to God himself, which creates levels of structure and authority and accountability that's important for us to steward well, not for the sake of restricting my call or can I get a larger platform, but rather I'm a pastor. There are people who God has asked me to lead well and faithfully as a servant. And if that's ever in jeopardy, there should be somebody who can step in and intervene. And so if I'm a local church attender, I would want to know that's true of my autonomous, locally governed church.
Precisely. Yeah. And I think, the other, I've talked about the shrug and how much I think that's hurt us, but I also think, what I've realized is I look at other denominational structures that can become bureaucratic, comparing that to ours. What I'm aware of is that we've built a great peacetime system.
Yeah.
So as long as everybody's doing well, we all like each other, we're all praying, we're all worshiping, the budgets are all right, everyone's behaving morally, nobody does anything immoral or even just contentious within their own teams or within their own churches or regions, our system's great. We all support each other, we pray, we worship, we encourage each other. If anything goes wrong that requires some external pressure, like, hey, I'm concerned about this, or just even oversight. Like, hey, I think you're probably doing this right, but hey, can we just put some eyes on this for your protection, for the protection of your church? We've not had any mechanisms to do that, other than depending on the good graces of the local pastor.
Yeah.
So what we're saying now is, hey, you're still a local church, but we have some ways that we want to relate with you, especially if things start to go a little bit wrong. And on the positive, we want to offer more opportunities for development, for growth, for church planting, mission, stuff with youth, stuff with kids. We want to have more support for your pastoral teams, your boards. So that connection creates opportunity, not just when things go wrong, but so that things go more right. And frankly, that has not been the way it's been. And man, I think by and large, it just provides a ton of opportunity.
Yeah.
Will that create nervousness and people that are used to being independent? Sure.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's normal. But I think we're already demonstrating, like you're saying, with complete transparency, lots of process. I think it's building trust over time. So it is. Well, it's encouraging. And it's been good work.
Totally.
It's been good work.
And that's the thing that is maybe, in some ways, it may be overshadowed by the weight of priority of the Ordination Bylaws project is the number of things that are producing or giving evidence to the abundance within our system. So when I think of John and Joel, our super regional leaders, crisscrossing the country on planes, visiting pastors who may have never had a visit before, and those pastors finding me in a hallway saying, I feel cared for in a way that is new and different, and I'm encouraged by and excited. People know my church. They've been in my lobby. They've been in my living room. And that's like a beautiful witness of the sort of care and consideration for people who have, again, given decades of service in ways that are underappreciated and sometimes never even seen. So that's one way where the abundance of sort of the life of our family is on display. Know that we, as a Vineyard movement, I think we did 480 Alpha courses across our churches this past 2024.
That's incredible.
That's going to lead to hundreds of salvations and hundreds of baptisms, if not thousands. And it shows a commitment to the generosity of the gospel, to be those who proclaim with boldness the goodness of God to those who have yet to hear. That is life-giving. Looking at the numbers of salvations or baptisms, when I look at the work of pastoral health and formation with Danielle Pathick, and obviously you're present to that because you see it in a unique way, but the hundreds of pastors who have attended to their financial well-being and have gotten out of debt and have attended to old student loans, or who have set up retirement in a way that they didn't know if they'd ever be able to stop working because they weren't quite prepared for their 70s and 80s. I know pastors who have lost weight, who have gotten fit, who have done other things to just promote their personal well-being in a job that is often challenging because it's sedentary and it's a lot of meals you eat. And then there's a lot of ways you try to cope with your stress. So there's ways that health has been injected. When I look at Vineyard Leadership Essentials or Worship Essentials, courses that are being offered to worship leaders and pastors to cultivate leadership development, hundreds, I think there's like 50 churches or 60 churches running 450 or 500 participants of Vineyard Leadership Essentials. Those sorts of things are happening not opposite to, but like in parallel with a commitment to be greater, with greater connection to one another, and to share the best of our resources with one another for the sake of growing the movement and taking advantage of the opportunities. So I do use personally like the new wine and new wineskins. Wineskins without wine don't serve a purpose. So whatever containers and structures, they need to be flexible enough that they can hold the fermentation of the thing that God is doing in this season. And so I'm sure, associations, when you look at the beautiful contribution of associations, there's no shortage of blessing that we've received in our conference settings at Better Together or the national conferences from the sort of gift of diversity that we're experiencing as a representative of a future picture of heaven, right? Heaven breaking back into our current reality. So as much as there is these kind of pictures of structural order, there is also abundance, right? If this is a 2x2 grid, the access of order is growing, but so is the access of abundance. The curiosity from college ministries around the country about how can we work together? Other denominations that are asking, how can we learn a little bit about praying for the sick or hearing God's voice? There's no shortage of people moving to us. And I think, Jay, you've said this many times. I know others have said it before you, is we are at our best when we're facing the least, the lost, and the broader body of Christ. And that seems to be evidenced in greater ways in this moment. And that's the abundance that we're experiencing that does require us to think through, well, then what's the next container? Or what's the next helpful structural kind of skeletal component that allows us to build more health into this body?
It's good, man.
Yeah.
I see everything you see and more. And so talk a little bit about, how you see things going moving forward a little bit. What's happening next?
I love the soundtrack. So however this is going to work in the background, you've had music and now
there's rain and a little bit of thunder, but I'm in it. I'm here with you. I'm not leaving. Yeah. We're going to keep going. I'm not. Let the thunder roll.
Well, I think if you were at the national conference, you would have heard this. If you were not able to attend the national conference or view the live streams, the last session really is the session that asks the question, for what? We're not building structures for the sake of building structures. We're not trying to create an homage to the past or, an edifice over the doorway that points back to 2025 or 1974. Right? We are committed to give this thing away. And so there is a generation of leaders and young believers and non-believers. There are kids in your kids ministry, in your youth ministry, your college ministry. There are people who have found your church because they married and somebody was attending that church. There's a whole generation of people who we believe will benefit from the work that we're doing now. I know if you look over kind of historic institutionalization moments, the work that's done is often not fully realized by the folks that do the initial kind of transitional work. I'm confident that the work we're doing is bringing strength and health to us right now. And my deep hope and my consistent prayer is that this thing produces for generations. And one of those generations is going to look back on this work and go, that was a mess. What were they trying to do? Let's do it a different way.
You are 100% right.
100% right.
That is true. That's called development over time. Totally. You want your kids to say that. You
Absolutely.
Want your kids to say to you, you did okay, but man, there's so much more. That's what you want. You want them to do better.
Totally.
Yeah, I agree.
And so at the end of the day, if we're building stuff to just simply hold on to it and appreciate what we have now, I think I would say that's actually criminal. I think that's the worst thing that we could be doing. We're building something to be given away. And whether that's to the least, the lost, and the marginalized, that's also true. But it is to a generation of people who have yet to fully enjoy the thing that we have enjoyed so freely, upon which we stand on the shoulders of people who sacrificed for us to experience what we experience. So I'm in this role because Phil Strout, or because Burt Wagner, or because Todd Hunter, or John Wimber, or so many other folks who we could name but couldn't name them all, did profound things and said yes to God in profound ways. And it cost, but it was worth it, because they could see a future that the kingdom would advance through the things they were putting their hands to. And so I look at my kids are the same age as yours, 18 and 21. I imagine grandkids at some point, and I would hope that the life that God has invited me to participate in is cultivated in the life of my kids, and that would transfer to grandkids. And there's going to be a moment when there's a generation I don't get to see. And this work is just like that. It is the work of building a foundation that can be given away, can hold the weight of the moment, and then can be given away for others to take their turn of building the wall, of doing the work, of assessing, evaluating, considering, imagining, and saying, what do we need to do differently in order to steward the possibilities that God has put before us? So I think the next question is not so much what next amendment do we enter into the bylaws? The question is, for what? Why have we done this work? We've done this work for folks who have yet to enjoy the vineyard in the way that we have.
Yep, that's good. Yeah, and I think it's, we can see some other of our friends that have led the way here a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've talked a little bit about the UK. Some of you in the UK listen to this podcast to see Dream the Impossible, the big youth camp
Mm-hmm.
that has been running there a while, and all the training that gets built out of that. That's some pretty serious thunder above me, by the way. I'm doing good, though. I'm still hiding. But
I'm believing this is a spiritual moment. I'm believing it's a spiritual moment, Jay. There is the thunder.
The Lord is ratifying this.
There's a baptism happening around you somewhere. There's a baptism around you somewhere.
Maybe. I hope so. Yeah, so I think there, we have some work to do in the next, to support some of what's already been happening with youth in college, but then also to build maybe some new expressions of camps and training and resourcing, which relates directly to an area that we've not done a lot with, which has been donor development and development financially for the Vineyard. We've always had our 3%, which we haven't honestly been that stringent with for the whole movement, though we're getting better about, because that's been an agreement. But now we're also raising some money. So talk a little bit about the Day of Giving and some of the development stuff we're doing.
Yeah, well, we've initiated a Day of Giving last year, coming out of our 50th anniversary for the very first time. It was a wonderful campaign in a variety of ways. Generosity was displayed through individuals and local churches who cooperated. I think the number was a little bit higher than $300,000 that was given to the movement to continue to kind of sow into the work that we're doing right now. This upcoming Day of Giving will coordinate with the kind of National Giving Tuesday in December. So as you move into the holiday season, we understand that people begin imagining, how do I give charitably before I come to the end of the year? How do I give charitably before I spend a ton on Christmas gifts that nobody's going to like and that it probably don't fit the person I'm buying that sweater for? And there's a generosity that is stirred at the end of the year. This year's focus will be on the development of next gen ministries. We see that all of the work that we're doing is for a generation to come. And that requires us to steward our resources. And if you've thought about giving in your own local church, you realize some people will give to buildings and some people will give to operations. Some people give a tithe because they understand that's an aspect of their worship. And there are folks who give to kids and give to youth because they know that the resources that are spent in kind of next gen ministries produce well beyond what we can ask or imagine. And so we're going to ask people to be generous. We're going to ask individuals to be generous. We're going to ask people to raise their hand and say, I'd give a chunk of my estate to this. I'd give real significant, 6 zeros, 7 zeros. I think there is an abundance in God's provision for the things he's asking us to. So I would hope that somebody's hearing this and going, I tithe to our local church and I love what the Vineyard is doing. And if they're going to steward this movement for another generation, I will spend generously on that and invest the talents and the resources God has given me for the future.
That's good. Well, while you've been talking, it's now officially hailing.
Yes.
There's big chunks of ice dropping around me. So I think before I die, and we're about on time anyway, I think I'm going to stop us here and just ask everyone to be praying. Like, how could you participate in being more generous to the Day of Giving, but also just giving in general to the Vineyard. So, Robb, it's been great talking to you. I'm going to go hide inside now and try not to die. I love you, dude. I'm so grateful for you and all that we're getting to do together. And the hail is light on me right now.
If locusts are coming next, get out of there quickly.
Dude, it's bad, bro. All right.
Love you, man.
I'm going to stop it. See you, everybody.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here are a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Vineyard USA. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.